Rome, 1704. A city cloaked in marble, shadow, and whispers, where candlelight flickered across cobblestone streets, and every alley carried the murmurs of hidden tales. In the heart of this ancient city, a sculptor worked unlike any other, his hands shaping stone into forms so vivid they seemed alive, breathing, watching, weeping with silent intensity. Patrons and nobles alike marveled at his skill, whispering of miracles and curses intertwined in the lifelike statues he created. Rumors spread swiftly through taverns, piazzas, and scholarly halls, speaking of impossible knowledge, of hands that could awaken stone, of eyes in marble that seemed to follow one's every move. The sculptor, a man of quiet demeanor, disappeared abruptly, leaving behind only frozen figures mid-motion, eyes wide with secrets never revealed, mouths slightly parted as if to speak truths forbidden to mortals. The city erupted with speculation. Scholars debated whether he had discovered techniques that blurred the line between genius and sorcery. Priests whispered warnings of unnatural acts, fearing divine retribution or the awakening of dark forces. His workshops became shrines to impossibility, echoing with unfinished forms, faint dust, and lingering scents of stone and wax. Apprentices who had studied under him vanished mysteriously, leaving behind fragments of work that carried traces of life imbued by the master's hand. Merchants sold miniature copies of his statues, claiming they contained the sculptor's very essence. Whispers of their vibrancy spreading fear and fascination alike. Poets wrote odes to the haunting vitality captured in marble, describing eyes that shifted, expressions that seemed to breathe, and shadows that moved independently of the sun. Scholars scoured notes and sketches, deciphering subtle symbols carved into the stone, believing them to contain hidden rituals or secrets too dangerous to wield. Nobles debated commissioning works in his style, questioning whether imitation would honor the genius or desecrate the legend. At night, citizens claimed the statues seemed to rearrange themselves, faces morphing in the dim candlelight, expressions changing ever so slightly when unobserved. Travelers spoke of fleeting sightings of the sculptor moving through misty streets, always just out of reach, a phantom presence echoing through Rome. Every piazza, gallery, and courtyard seemed imbued with his spirit, as if the city itself held its breath in anticipation of a revelation that might never come. Conversations in taverns and salons alike revolved around sightings, whispers of voices carried on the wind, faintly echoing from empty chambers, and shadows that twisted unnaturally around corners. Patrons debated whether to destroy or preserve his unfinished works, understanding that each decision carried consequences beyond comprehension. The city oscillated between reverence and terror, citizens caught in a liminal space between awe and dread, as the sculptor's legend permeated every stone and fresco. Stories of nocturnal apparitions, statues moving subtly, and whispers of names unknown fed the obsession that gripped Rome, spanning generations. Scholars and artists speculated on the sculptor's fate. Had he fled, been claimed by death, or transcended mortal bounds, leaving only his work as evidence of his existence? Every alley seemed to hum with memory, every shadow hinted at presence, and every whispered rumor reinforced the notion that genius, once unleashed, leaves traces too potent to vanish. The sculptor's disappearance was more than absence. It became an enduring imprint of the impossible, a haunting interwoven with the very soul of Rome. Citizens prayed, cursed and admired, caught in a web of fascination and fear, aware that the statues they passed by might yet watch, listen, or move in ways only their creator knew. Every corner held a silent witness, every courtyard a testimony to the life carved into stone. Tales grew of rooms where marble seemed to pulse faintly, where unfinished forms shifted imperceptibly, and tools remained warm to the touch, as if the sculptor's energy lingered. Apprentices' sketches hinted at deeper mysteries, symbols entwined with techniques that defied natural law, suggesting knowledge that blurred art and the arcane. Rome became a city haunted by presence, absence, and possibility, a metropolis suspended between the beauty of creation and the terror of the unknown. The sculptor's legacy became the pulse of the city, an obsession woven into conversations, laws, and the movement of shadow and light. Patrons, scholars, and common citizens alike felt the tension. The weight of genius vanished, yet omnipresent. Every whispered legend, every fearful glance, every silent awe solidified the haunting truth. Some lives, some brilliance, cannot simply disappear without leaving the world changed. Rome waited, silently, for the story to continue, the secret to reveal itself, or the sculptor to return from the depths of history and legend. In this city of breathless marble and eternal shadows, The vanished sculptor left behind not just statues, but a legacy that would forever blur the line between life, stone and memory, haunting every corner, every street, and every soul who dared to witness his work. The city murmured, alive with tales of the vanished sculptor, each whispered account threading fear and fascination through the streets of Rome. Statues once admired for beauty now inspired unease. Their eyes seemed to follow, their lips quivered with silent secrets, their forms subtly shifting in the dim candlelight. Apprentices and patrons alike recounted strange occurrences. Tools moved without explanation, marble dust appeared where it had not been, and sketches seemed altered overnight. Rumors flourished, each one more unsettling than the last, suggesting that the sculptor had delved into forbidden knowledge, secrets of life itself embedded within stone. Scholars debated fervently in private chambers, poring over his notes, attempting to decode symbols carved subtly into statues. Convinced that mastery over these forms granted control over something beyond comprehension, noble families feared for their commissioned pieces, worried that possession might invite misfortune or curses, while merchants claimed that small replicas whispered his essence, a haunting presence captured in miniature form. The church held councils, torn between condemning blasphemous manipulation of matter and acknowledging divine artistry, struggling to reconcile awe with fear. Streets grew quieter at night, shadows lengthened unnaturally, and citizens reported fleeting glimpses of a figure moving through mist, always just beyond reach, as though the sculptor himself lingered between worlds. Every piazza, gallery, and courtyard seemed charged with unseen energy, each corner vibrating with memory, each statue an unspoken witness to vanished genius. Legends spread of a hidden workshop beneath the city, where unfinished forms awaited the sculptor's return, breathing faintly in the darkness, animated by secrets lost to mortal understanding. Children were drawn to these works, claiming eyes followed them, smiles shifted, and whispers carried their names, creating both terror and wonder. Poets and storytellers wove these tales into verse, dramatizing the life imbued in stone, the unnatural vitality and the eerie, almost sentient, presence that lingered long after the artist's disappearance. Apprentices' diaries hinted at rituals, patterns, and methods too dangerous to replicate, warning that improper handling could awaken the statue's latent vitality. Scholars working secretly in libraries uncovered references to celestial alignments, mysterious alchemical practices, and inscriptions suggesting that the sculptor's knowledge bridged art and occult science. Nobles hesitated to disturb existing works, aware that even slight changes might provoke reactions that defied explanation, reinforcing the city's delicate balance between reverence and dread. Stories of apparitions, statues that moved subtly, and whispers emanating from empty chambers perpetuated fascination across generations, embedding the sculptor's legend deeply within Rome's culture. Nightly, shadows twisted unnaturally around arches and columns, mirroring the tension in citizens' hearts, as they felt the lingering presence of one who had once breathed life into stone. Patrons debated ethical dilemmas of commissioning works, fearing imitation could desecrate genius, yet desiring the wonder of his craft. Scholars shared findings cautiously, fearing that revealing secrets might unleash forces beyond control. Merchants promoted miniature figures as vessels of the sculptor's energy, and while some dismissed these as superstition, others experienced uncanny sensations, confirming the persistent influence of the vanished master. The city's atmosphere became a mixture of silent admiration, cautious fear, and obsessive curiosity. Every alley and gallery held the memory of motion captured in marble, every shadow a potential echo of life. Letters between noble families hinted at sightings, voices, and faint movements among statues, reinforcing the belief that the sculptor's essence lingered in every corner. Apprentices continued to study fragments of his work, some claiming to hear guidance in whispers, instructions encoded in curves, edges, and subtle angles, as though the master spoke from beyond disappearance. Rome's identity intertwined with these haunted creations, every citizen, scholar, and visitor unconsciously acknowledging that this vanished genius had altered the perception of reality itself. Time passed, yet the city remained on edge, attuned to the faintest stirrings, the softest breath that might signify life within stone. The vanished sculptor's influence persisted, a shadowed pulse beneath Rome's marble surface, reminding all that some brilliance cannot vanish, some mysteries cannot be contained, and some legends continue to breathe long after their creators have disappeared. Rome, 1704. The city buzzed with the pulse of art, religion, and political intrigue, its streets lined with grand palaces, bustling marketplaces, and the ever-present scent of marble dust. Among these thriving streets, a sculptor emerged, a man whose life was as mysterious as his works. He was known only by the patrons he served and the apprentices he trained, leaving no personal records, no letters, no signs of conventional life. His creations, however, spoke volumes, each statue carved with such precision and vitality that it seemed to breathe, as if the soul of the subject had been trapped in stone. Patrons included noble families, clergy, and wealthy merchants, each eager to claim a piece of his genius. Rumors spread about the sculptor's methods, whispered among artisans, scholars, and curious onlookers. Some spoke of secret rituals, others of experiments that bordered on the unnatural. He was seen working at all hours, often at night, when shadows stretched across courtyards and the faint glow of candlelight revealed features in stone that appeared impossibly lifelike. His apprentices were few but chosen with care, instructed in ways that seemed to defy traditional techniques, combining anatomy, observation, and a mysterious understanding of movement. Venice and Florence had their own masters, but none captured life in marble as he did. Rome had become the epicenter of whispered fascination and fear. The city's elite competed for commissions, offering unimaginable wealth for statues that seemed to capture the very essence of humanity. Each workshop he entered became a sanctum, filled with tools arranged with obsessive precision, sketches of unfinished works, and partially completed figures that conveyed motion, emotion, and breath. The sculptor himself remained enigmatic, avoiding conversation beyond what was necessary, his eyes revealing little, his voice soft yet commanding. Observers noted his hands were deft, almost ethereal, moving across marble with a grace that suggested communion with forces beyond ordinary perception. The church monitored his work cautiously, intrigued by his skill yet wary of rumors suggesting supernatural influence. Scholars and physicians speculated about his techniques, examining anatomy, proportions, and the uncanny realism of musculature, wondering if he had uncovered secrets lost to time or if darker forces guided his hands. Apprentices spoke quietly of nights spent carving in silence, guided by unseen instruction, feeling the stone respond to subtle commands as if alive. Patrons often returned to his workshops, fascinated and unsettled, noting small changes in statues that seemed to occur overnight, gestures shifting slightly, eyes glimmering with lifelike intensity, expressions subtly altered. The city's streets themselves became a stage for the sculptor's legend. Visitors described glimpses of him moving through foggy alleys, tools in hand, disappearing around corners, leaving no trace. Markets buzzed with talk of statues behaving strangely, minor miracles or unsettling events attributed to the master's presence. Apprentices sometimes disappeared, returning weeks later with eyes wide, silent, and carrying work that seemed imbued with a strange vitality. Scholars documented these occurrences meticulously, debating whether it was genius, madness, or something entirely otherworldly. Families feared both blessing and curse, knowing a commission from the sculptor could inspire awe but also invite misfortune. The master's past was a blank canvas, known only through the living artistry he left behind. Each patron, each observer, each citizen became part of the legend, complicit in both admiration and terror. Streets echoed with conversations about the vanished sculptor, each tale layering suspense, intrigue, and awe upon the last. Travelers, poets, and artists carried stories beyond Rome, spreading the mystique, amplifying the allure, and cementing his place in history before he had vanished. The city itself seemed to pulse in tandem with the sculptor's presence, shadows stretching longer, echoes lingering, statues watching silently. Even as he moved among the streets unnoticed, the lifelike quality of his art commanded attention, leaving an indelible mark on the city's soul. Marble courtyards, grand galleries, and quiet chapels all bore witness to a genius whose life was entwined with the pulse of Rome. Patrons debated the ethics of his creations, scholars analyzed the anatomy and motion captured in stone, and apprentices marveled at the perfection he demanded. Every detail, from the tilt of a head to the subtle curve of a hand, demonstrated mastery beyond comprehension, blending artistry, observation, and something undefinable. As shadows lengthened over cobblestone streets, the presence of the sculptor became a topic of hushed conversation, a mixture of reverence, fear, and insatiable curiosity. His reputation grew with each passing day, setting the stage for the events that would follow, for the disappearance that would cement his place in legend, and for the haunting legacy left behind in every marble figure that seemed to breathe. The year 1704 carried with it both splendor and unease in Rome, as the city's streets teemed with artisans, merchants, and nobility, all caught in the silent rhythm of history unfolding. The sculptor's fame had spread far beyond his immediate patrons, whispered through the corridors of power and scholarly halls alike. Each commission he accepted seemed to carry a promise of marvel, yet with it came subtle dread. The statues were so lifelike that many felt they contained a spirit, a consciousness lingering within cold stone. Apprentices reported that working alongside him was a mixture of wonder and terror, as the master demanded precision that bordered on obsession, guiding hands over marble with a knowledge that seemed otherworldly. Techniques were whispered, never fully explained, leaving each observer in awe of what might be natural skill or some hidden force. Patrons spoke of subtle phenomena, shadows deepening unnaturally near completed works, faint sounds of breathing where none should exist, and the sensation that statues moved ever so slightly when not observed. His own movements were quiet, deliberate, almost ghostly. When he entered a workshop, the air seemed to shift. Tension mingled with anticipation, as if the very stones acknowledged his presence. Noble families argued over his pieces, debating whether the creation was blessing or curse, while the church quietly monitored his activities, concerned over rumors of uncanny vitality within stone. Scholars dissected anatomy, proportions, and motion in statues, trying to understand the genius behind each carving, debating whether the work was human or something beyond comprehension. Apprentices documented everything meticulously, aware that the sculptor's legacy would outlive them, carrying instructions encoded not only in technique but in subtle cues and gestures, hints of methods never fully revealed. Workshops became sanctuaries of intrigue, filled with sketches, tools, and fragments of partially completed works, each a testament to a craft that blurred the line between life and art. Markets buzzed with tales of minor miracles, statues whispering names, eyes following visitors, and figures that seemed to shift subtly in the flickering candlelight. Stories spread of the sculptor seen moving through misty alleys at night, vanishing before anyone could approach as though guided by forces unseen. Apprentices who returned from nights of work often spoke in hushed tones of fleeting visions, statues appearing alive, or shadows moving independently of light. Patrons commissioned new works hesitantly, aware that each piece might harbor more than artistry, perhaps a trace of the sculptor's enigmatic presence. The city's pulse seemed intertwined with the master's legacy, shadows stretching in anticipation, corridors echoing the silent weight of statues that watched. Letters between scholars hinted at hidden workshops and secret gatherings where knowledge was shared cautiously. Each discovery weighed for its power and danger. Families debated whether to preserve or hide certain pieces, fearing the implications of their lifelike quality, while poets and travelers chronicled tales of statues that seemed to breathe, move, or observe. The sculptor's techniques, rumored to combine anatomical precision with hidden forces, inspired awe and fear in equal measure. Streets and piazzas became theaters for the uncanny. Citizens spoke of statues subtly shifting position overnight, expressions changing, features alive in ways that challenged reason. Apprentices carefully followed instructions, replicating forms under strict supervision, while scholars attempted to document methods without invoking potential consequences. Rumors grew darker, suggesting rituals, alchemical secrets, or knowledge that transcended mortal understanding, linking artistry to forces beyond explanation. Patrons remained captivated, drawn to both brilliance and danger, each commission a gamble between admiration and dread. Even the city itself seemed to respond, alleys whispering, shadows dancing, and air thick with anticipation, as though Rome itself awaited the sculptor's next move. Statues in public squares drew attention from travelers, citizens and clergy alike, each noticing subtleties that defied logic, and each retelling further embedding the sculptor's legend in the fabric of the city. Nights carried heightened tension. Candlelight revealed slight movements, soft sounds, and shapes that shifted subtly when unobserved. Scholars debated whether these phenomena were perception, genius, or something beyond mortal understanding. Patrons worried over the power of ownership, fearing the statue's potential influence, while apprentices marveled at the brilliance they witnessed daily. Every alley, gallery, and courtyard seemed haunted by the master's presence, a reminder that genius leaves traces that time cannot erase. The vanished sculptor had left Rome a city alive with whispers, shadows, and statues that seemed to breathe, ensuring that every observer, every citizen, and every visitor would feel the tension between admiration and fear for generations to come. In the months leading to his disappearance, Rome seemed to pulse with anticipation and unease surrounding the sculptor. Rumors grew louder with every passing day, whispered in workshops, taverns, and salons alike. Observers noted minor, unexplainable phenomena, shadows that shifted against natural light, faint murmurs echoing through empty galleries, and statues whose eyes seemed to glimmer with awareness. Apprentices reported long nights of work under the master's meticulous guidance, carving, measuring, and adjusting forms until they appeared almost impossibly alive. Patrons grew anxious yet obsessed, visiting workshops repeatedly to witness the almost supernatural vitality of each statue. Scholars debated the nature of his skill, some attributing it to divine inspiration, others to dark practices hidden beneath layers of marble. Stories circulated of minor incidents, tools moving on their own, sketches that subtly changed overnight, and partially completed statues appearing slightly altered in posture or expression. Each tale amplified fascination and fear, entwining the sculptor's presence with both reverence and dread. Noble families commissioned works cautiously, aware that each statue carried more than mere artistry. It carried an essence, a shadow of life that defied conventional understanding. The church remained watchful, noting that the sculptor worked with precision that bordered on the mystical, yet refrained from direct intervention, fearing repercussions from forces they could not comprehend. Apprentices described an almost ritualistic approach to creation. Every curve, every line, every detail performed with a rhythm that seemed to awaken something dormant within the stone. Visitors sometimes claimed to see statues as gestures shift subtly when unobserved, or expressions change in the flickering light of the evening, fueling speculation that the sculptor had mastered a secret impossible to articulate. Patrons and scholars alike recorded sightings of fleeting shadows, ghostly movements, and whispers, attributing them to the sculptor's lingering influence or to the statue's unnatural animation. The streets of Rome became charged with stories. Taverns echoed with discussions of eerie events. Artists debated theories of life imbued into marble, and apprentices exchanged coded warnings about what to touch or observe. Markets sold miniature replicas, each rumored to carry traces of the sculptor's essence, tempting collectors with promises of beauty and danger intertwined. Travelers noted the air of the city shifting, shadows stretching longer in the presence of his works, the weight of unseen observation settling over piazzas and courtyards. Patrons who visited galleries late at night often claimed a sensation of being watched, a whisper brushing past the ear, or a statue subtly altering its posture, hinting at intelligence beyond mere stone. Scholars pored over anatomical accuracy, emotional realism, and subtle cues in musculature, debating whether genius alone could account for the almost sentient quality of the works. Apprentices' diaries hinted at secret instructions, gestures, and methods passed down in hushed tones, techniques too dangerous to fully articulate, yet necessary to achieve the lifelike results. Nobility discussed the ethics of commissioning works, fearing that possession of such statues could invite misfortune, curses, or attention from forces beyond comprehension. Nightfall brought new layers of fear and fascination. Candlelight revealed shifting shadows, fleeting motions, and statues' eyes that seemed to glimmer with awareness, leaving observers unsettled yet entranced. Patrons struggled with admiration and dread, unable to reconcile the beauty of creation with the possibility of supernatural influence embedded within. Stories of apprentices who vanished for days, returning with unfinished pieces imbued with subtle, inexplicable life, circulated among patrons and scholars alike. Each incident reinforced the growing legend, the sense that something beyond mortal understanding was at play. A delicate tension between awe and terror gripping every workshop, gallery, and street. Discussions in secret societies and scholarly meetings delved into possibilities that range from advanced anatomical mastery to alchemy, ritual, or even forbidden knowledge. The city's rhythm itself seemed entwined with the sculptor's presence, every alleyway vibrating with anticipation, every courtyard holding a memory of motion captured in stone, waiting, watching. Families and patrons debated preservation versus destruction, aware that each choice might awaken forces unknown or provoke consequences unforeseen. Rome became a stage for anticipation, every citizen, artist, and traveler subconsciously acknowledging the tension, the blend of genius, mystery, and subtle dread surrounding the vanished sculptor. Stories intertwined with shadows, whispers, and the faint pulse of life in stone, creating a tapestry of fascination and fear that would echo long after the artist's disappearance. As the months progressed, the legend of the sculptor intensified, building to the fateful moments that would culminate in a disappearance that no eye could witness, yet all would feel in the haunted streets and lifelike statues of Rome. Tension in Rome grew palpable as the sculptor's influence seeped into every corner of the city. Patrons whispered anxiously in galleries, comparing notes about statues that seemed to shift subtly, expressions changing with the angle of light. Apprentices labored silently under the master's exacting gaze, aware that every line, every curve, every detail carried weight far beyond ordinary artistry. Rumors multiplied, spreading from workshops to taverns, from scholarly halls to private salons, each story adding layers to the legend of the man whose creations breathed. Nobility debated fiercely over commissions, weighing the honor of possessing a masterpiece against the potential danger that its lifelike quality implied. Scholars documented anomalies meticulously, small adjustments in posture, faint glimmers in eyes, and subtle gestures that seemed alive only when unobserved. Merchants sold miniature reproductions, claiming that even in scaled form, they retained traces of vitality, enticing buyers with fascination and fear entwined. The church, cautious but curious, monitored developments quietly, issuing warnings about potential transgression while acknowledging the undeniable brilliance of his work. Citizens observed statues in piazzas and courtyards, reporting minor shifts in position, expressions, and subtle movements, suggesting a sentience beyond human comprehension. Travelers brought accounts from across Europe, recounting eerie similarities in perception, and suggesting that Rome itself had become a stage for the sculptor's mastery over life and form. Apprentices' diaries revealed practices bordering on ritual, specific timings, gestures, and incantations guiding chisels with uncanny precision, hinting that more than skill was at play. Scholars debated possibilities ranging from extreme anatomical mastery to arcane knowledge, alchemy, or forbidden arts that blurred the line between creation and animation. Patrons experienced unease mingled with awe, observing statues that seemed to respond to their gaze, tilting heads, shifting eyes, or subtly breathing in stillness. Nightfall amplified tension. Flickering candlelight transformed shadows into living echoes, and whispers of movement traveled down empty corridors. Minor incidents, tools relocating themselves, unfinished work slightly altered, sounds of breath in silent galleries, intensified belief in the sculptor's mastery over forces beyond ordinary perception. Nobility consulted cautiously, weighing the potential blessings and curses contained within each marble form. Conversations in taverns and salons revolved around sightings, voices, and unexplained movements, intertwining fascination with dread. Apprentices recounted visions of statues subtly rearranging themselves overnight, as if guided by consciousness embedded within the stone. Scholars maintained secret journals, meticulously noting shifts in form, symbols carved subtly into surfaces, and patterns that suggested knowledge beyond mortal reach. Marketplaces thrived with reproductions, charms, and miniature statues, each claiming to encapsulate the sculptor's essence, appealing to collectors driven by both curiosity and fear. Streets and alleys hummed with tension, shadows elongating unnaturally, carrying echoes of presence in galleries and courtyards alike. Patrons and scholars debated whether the sculptor's techniques could be replicated, fearing that mishandling could awaken latent power in stone. Families deliberated over the possession of commissioned works, uncertain whether reverence or destruction was safer. Even ordinary citizens became part of the legend, noticing minor anomalies in statues, recalling whispers, and sensing subtle movements in the periphery of vision. Each report, each anecdote layered intrigue and suspense upon the city, creating a network of stories that intertwined with Rome's very essence. Tales of apparitions, shadows that moved independently, and whispers emanating from empty chambers became commonplace, embedding the sculptor's legend deep into collective consciousness. Patrons, scholars, and apprentices alike grew aware of a delicate balance. Admiration teetered with fear, fascination mixed with caution, and every interaction with the master's work demanded respect. The city itself seemed to react, alleys resonating with memory, courtyards vibrating with energy, and every corner bearing witness to subtle life in marble. Observers speculated endlessly. Had the sculptor discovered a way to breathe life into stone? Or were the effects psychological, a manifestation of his genius overwhelming perception? The tension reached every home, every gallery, every marketplace. Rome existed in a liminal space, suspended between ordinary life and the extraordinary presence the sculptor commanded. As days grew into weeks and weeks into months, anticipation swelled. The city, its patrons, its apprentices, and its citizens waited for a revelation, a climax to the legend. for a moment when the master's genius would either be understood or vanish forever, leaving only the haunting evidence of life carved from stone. Every whispered story, every shift of shadow, every subtle breath in silence built toward the inevitable, creating a mounting sense of suspense that would shape Rome's history and immortalize the sculptor's name in both awe and fear. The night of his disappearance arrived without warning, shrouded in mist and silence. Rome's streets were unusually still, as if the city itself held its breath. The sculptor worked late into the night in his primary workshop, chiseling a grand statue that dwarfed all previous creations. Apprentices were present, their hands trembling with anticipation, aware that this piece carried more significance than any before. Patrons had been promised a reveal the following morning, yet the master insisted on secrecy, working under flickering candlelight, shadows twisting across the marble floor. Rumors whispered of chants, gestures, and movements performed in a precise rhythm, unseen forces guiding his hands, bringing life into stone in ways no mortal had achieved. The statue took form, a figure so vivid it seemed poised to step down from the pedestal, eyes glimmering with consciousness, veins subtly defined, muscles tense with unspoken energy. Apprentices watched, awestruck, as subtle movements traced the contours of the marble, small but undeniable. A finger shifted, a foot adjusted, a head tilted almost imperceptibly. Patrons, arriving early the next day, would find the workshop empty. Tools lay scattered, sketches open, unfinished statues frozen mid-motion, yet the main creation was missing. The master himself had vanished, leaving behind a silence heavier than stone, a void that reverberated through corridors, piazzas, and alleys. Scholars later speculated about the final moments. Had he transcended human limits, merged with his creation, or been claimed by forces unknown? Witnesses among apprentices reported feeling a sudden chill, a pressure in the chest, as if presence itself had been removed from the room. Patrons described an overwhelming aura of energy that lingered, thick and almost tangible, saturating the air with the sense of something profound yet terrifying. Doors were found locked from the inside, windows intact, yet no trace of the sculptor remained. The final statue's absence became a subject of obsession. Was it hidden, destroyed, or alive in ways defying comprehension? The city buzzed with speculation, each tale more elaborate than the last. Stories of apprentices seeing ghostly movements, whispers in empty halls, and fleeting glimpses of a figure in mist-laden streets. Families and patrons grew anxious, debating whether to search or preserve what little remained. Scholars postulated that the sculptor had discovered a method of imbuing life into marble itself, a secret too dangerous to leave unfinished, a technique that could alter reality. The disappearance created a rift between awe and fear, fascination and dread. Every completed work, every fragment, every unfinished sketch became a potential clue, each observed for signs of the impossible. Witnesses spoke of faint traces of movement in remaining statues, fingers adjusting slightly, heads tilting, eyes glimmering when unobserved, suggesting the master's influence persisted. Rumors of curses, divine intervention, or forbidden knowledge spread quickly, entwining the disappearance with myth. Scholars sought patterns in his works, attempting to understand the culmination of his techniques, the final act that might explain both his vanishing and the vitality of his art. Apprentices reported sudden inspirations, ideas that seemed whispered into their minds, guidance from a presence absent yet palpable. Patrons debated the ethics of commissioning posthumous works, fearing that imitation might provoke unintended consequences. Market speculation surged. Replicas of the master's previous statues commanded unprecedented prices, their value tied to both artistry and the enigma of the final disappearance. Churches debated moral implications, whether the sculptor's genius was blessed or damned, and whether his final act had crossed thresholds no mortal should breach. Legends quickly solidified. The sculptor, lost to history, had completed a final work that existed somewhere between life and stone. His presence infused into it, leaving apprentices, patrons, and the city to grapple with its implications. Streets, alleys, and workshops became stages for recounting sightings, whispers, and anomalies, each reinforcing the climactic mystery. Citizens, scholars, and travelers alike were caught in the tension between reverence and terror, aware that something extraordinary had occurred, yet unable to grasp its nature. The final night marked not only the end of the sculptor's visible life, but the beginning of a legend that would haunt Rome for generations, blending art, mystery, and the supernatural into a climax both shocking and unresolved, ensuring that every observer, every statue, and every shadow carried the weight of what had transpired. The city awoke the following morning to a sense of unease unlike any before. News spread quickly. The sculptor was gone. The grand statue vanished without a trace, leaving patrons, apprentices, and neighbors in shock. The workshop stood as a silent witness, tools untouched, sketches open, unfinished works frozen mid-motion. Yet the centerpiece, the final culmination of his genius, was absent. Rumors erupted immediately. Some claimed he had walked into marble itself, others that he had been taken by forces beyond comprehension. Scholars examined every fragment, every shard, every subtle anomaly in statues, searching for clues. They noted tiny shifts in posture, minute changes in expression, as though the sculptures themselves bore witness to the event. Patrons argued, some desperate to find tangible proof, others fearful of disturbing what might still be alive or imbued with the master's essence. The church expressed concern, commissioning inquiries into whether his disappearance was natural or supernatural, whether divine punishment or blessing had intervened. Apprentices, terrified and awestruck, described the workshop's last moments, a chill that pressed against their chests, a sensation of being observed, a presence vanishing, yet lingering. Visitors reported faint movements in remaining statues, shadows shifting against logic, and whispers that seemed to emanate from empty corners. The disappearance became the apex of the sculptor's legend, a moment where skill, mystery, and fear converged. Scholars debated whether the final act had been intentional. Did he complete the ultimate feat of animating stone and step beyond mortality, or was he a victim of forces he had summoned? Every attempt to reconstruct the sequence of events only deepened the mystery. Patrons revisited their commissions, noting details they had previously overlooked. Subtle imperfections, tiny curves, expressions frozen mid-thought, all suggesting that his influence lingered. Market speculation surged, with replicas gaining mythical value, rumored to carry fragments of life captured in the master's final act. Tales of apprentices glimpsing fleeting figures in misty streets circulated, some claiming to feel guidance in whispers, others haunted by the perception of eyes watching them from marble surfaces. The city's pulse quickened with anticipation, tension, and awe. Even streets not connected to his workshop seemed to carry echoes of the event. Alleys held longer shadows. Courtyards emitted faint energy, and citizens whispered of the sculptor's presence felt everywhere yet seen nowhere. Scholars explored hidden workshops, analyzed symbols embedded in works, and cross-referenced diaries, yet no definitive answer emerged. Rumors of ritualistic practice, forbidden knowledge, and contact with forces beyond human understanding flourished, intertwining legend and reality. Patrons feared both the absence and the potential of unfinished work. Each decision carried weight, the possibility of awakening latent power embedded in stone. Apprentices struggled with fear and responsibility, aware that they had touched fragments of genius, possibly of life itself, and carried knowledge too potent for ordinary comprehension. Every alley, every piazza, and every gallery became a theater for recounting the climactic disappearance. Tales of shadows, whispers, and statues that seemed to breathe grew with each retelling. Families debated ethical choices, whether to preserve, hide, or destroy certain works, fearing consequences that might transcend life. Travelers carried the story across borders, spreading fascination and fear, ensuring that the sculptor's name would endure far beyond Rome. Nightfall brought renewed tension. Shadows stretched unnaturally, and faint movements or shifts in statues reinforced the sense that the master's influence persisted. Discussions among scholars, patrons, and citizens centered on the mystery. Had he truly vanished, transcended human limits, or become a part of his final creation? The climax left Rome suspended between understanding and fear, beauty and dread, mastery and the unknowable. Statues, workshops, and alleys held silent testimony, a lingering pulse of genius and enigma. The sculptor's disappearance became a focal point for legend, a terrifying and awe-inspiring moment where creation, life, and mystery converged. Every observer, apprentice, and patron understood that the city itself had become a vessel for the unresolved. That genius had vanished, yet left a presence that would haunt every corner, every shadow, and every soul for generations to come. The city of Rome awoke to a void left by the sculptor's disappearance, a silence heavier than any before. Streets that once echoed with the clatter of artisans now seemed subdued, as if the absence had absorbed sound itself. Patrons returned to their commissioned works, each statue scrutinized with a mixture of awe and fear, searching for signs of vitality or clues to the vanished master's fate. Scholars convened in private chambers, poring over sketches, notes, and partially completed figures, debating endlessly whether the sculptor had transcended mortality, been claimed by forces unknown, or simply vanished into the shadows. Apprentices grappled with a sense of loss and responsibility, their hands still familiar with the techniques taught, yet unsure if they could replicate the impossible vitality that had defined the master's work. Markets buzzed with speculation, miniature replicas gaining heightened significance, rumored to carry fragments of the sculptor's essence. Patrons debated whether to preserve or conceal statues, fearful that exposure might provoke consequences beyond comprehension. The church issued statements warning against hubris, yet acknowledging that the artistry exhibited was unmatched, a blend of genius and enigma that had left the city in awe. Families whispered of strange occurrences in their homes, subtle movements in statues, soft breaths in silent rooms, shadows that seemed to linger longer than logic allowed. Scholars recorded these anecdotes meticulously, adding to a growing compendium of unexplained phenomena. Taverns and salons echoed with tales of apprentices glimpsing the sculptor in fleeting shadows, whispers of guidance or warning carried on the wind, and the sense that his presence remained, though unseen. Patrons who had been intimately involved in commissions experienced heightened unease, noting minor shifts in posture, expressions, and the faint glimmer of awareness in eyes carved from stone. The city itself seemed to vibrate with the aftermath. Every alley, courtyard, and gallery held traces of tension, anticipation, and lingering mystery. Stories multiplied, each retelling amplifying fascination and fear, ensuring that the sculptor's legend would endure. Scholars debated whether the techniques he employed could ever be reconstructed, whether the final work had been lost, hidden, or transformed into a state beyond comprehension. Apprentices struggled with the weight of knowledge and the lingering energy of creation, understanding that each tool, each measurement, each unfinished work carried potential that might be dangerous or sacred. Patrons argued among themselves, weighing pride against caution, honor against fear, questioning whether public display of works might invite misfortune. Citizens noticed subtle anomalies in public statues, eyes that seemed to follow, shadows that shifted against logic, small gestures that suggested sentience. Each incident reinforced the impression that the sculptor's disappearance was not a simple absence, but a transformation, a crossing of boundaries between art, life, and the unknown. Scholars continued to explore hidden workshops, decipher coded sketches, and analyze unfinished pieces, piecing together theories that ranged from extraordinary genius to contact with supernatural forces. Tales of vanished apprentices, whispers in empty galleries, and faint movements in statues perpetuated the sense of awe, reinforcing the climax's impact. Patrons struggled with conflicting emotions. Admiration, fear, reverence, and obsession intertwined, shaping decisions regarding preservation, display, and legacy. The city became a living repository of tension. Every shadow, every statue, every stone carrying the weight of mystery left behind. Markets and collectors placed enormous value on surviving works, intertwining commerce with legend, turning mere objects into symbols of wonder and unease. Scholars documented every phenomenon meticulously, fearing both disbelief and misinterpretation, knowing that the sculptor's genius challenged conventional understanding. Taverns, salons, and private gatherings became forums for recounting sightings, sensations, and inexplicable experiences, each story reinforcing the haunting presence left in his wake. Apprentices felt a mixture of grief, responsibility, and inspiration, understanding that they bore fragments of knowledge too potent to ignore yet too dangerous to fully utilize. Patrons and families weighed decisions regarding custody, fearing the repercussions of exposure or the loss of legacy. Streets, galleries, and courtyards resonated with tension, anticipation, and awe, marking Rome as a city permanently altered by the absence of a master whose work seemed alive. Time did not dull the impact. Each day brought renewed scrutiny, subtle phenomena, and the deepening of legend, ensuring that the sculptor's influence extended far beyond his physical presence. The aftermath left the city suspended in a liminal space between admiration and fear, genius and mystery, beauty and dread, as every observer, scholar, and apprentice confronted the enduring consequences of a life and work that had vanished yet remained palpably present. As months turned into years, the legend of the vanished sculptor evolved into something more profound than any ordinary disappearance. Rome began to treat his name like a sacred secret, spoken softly, never written in public archives. His remaining works were guarded under candlelight, tended by curators who claimed to hear faint sighs echoing from the marble. Patrons, once proud to display his creations, now shrouded them in velvet and incense, believing that exposure might awaken what was best left dormant. Scholars argued that the statues were not merely art, but vessels, containers of life force or divine fragments. Some insisted that the sculptor had discovered the lost formula of animation, a method whispered in alchemical texts but never proven. The church responded with caution, declaring that such speculation bordered on heresy. Yet even high priests felt a shiver when they passed his unfinished workshop, where air itself seemed to hum with memory. In dim light, apprentices claimed to see faint movements, shadows shifting where none should, outlines flickering like breathing figures frozen in mid-transition. One apprentice, consumed by obsession, tried to replicate his master's process using marble from the same quarry. His attempt ended in madness, leaving behind a single fragment, a half-formed face that seemed to exhale in the dark. The story spread quickly, turning caution into fear. People began to avoid the sculptor's district at night, claiming that whispers rose from the stones themselves, urging craftsmen to continue the work that had been left incomplete. Artisans spoke of dreams where the sculptor appeared, guiding their hands only for them to wake and find chisel marks on blocks they had never touched. Patrons reported emotional disturbances, insomnia, trembling, visions of eyes following them through galleries. Scholars chronicled each case as evidence that the sculptor's legacy transcended his physical disappearance, that he had imprinted something living upon his art. In time, a secret society formed, the Custodians of Breath, dedicated to protecting his works and studying their mysterious vitality. They met in underground chambers beneath the old quarter, where candlelight glinted off marble faces too lifelike to be mere stone. Their journals, preserved in hidden vaults, spoke of experiments with sound frequencies, light refraction, and sacred geometry, all in pursuit of unlocking what the sculptor had achieved. But their efforts often ended in tragedy. Inexplicable fainting fits, shattered statues, walls that seemed to echo with the sound of breathing. One night, a great storm swept across Rome. Lightning struck the oldest gallery that housed the sculptor's final piece, a veiled woman whose expression was said to shift under moonlight. The structure collapsed, burying the statue beneath rubble. When the debris was cleared, nothing remained. No fragments, no dust, no trace of marble, only the faint imprint of a figure pressed into the stone floor, as though the statue had stepped away. The city trembled with rumor. Some said she had awakened. Others whispered that the sculptor had returned to reclaim her. That event marked the end of public discourse. The church ordered silence, the scholars dispersed, and the custodians vanished into secrecy. Yet the legend endured. Artists from across Europe traveled to Rome, hoping to find remnants of his workshop, to feel the hum that still lingered in the air. Those who entered described sensations, heat radiating from cold marble, the pulse of invisible life beneath their fingertips. Some wept, others fled. Centuries later, when historians reopened forgotten archives, they found sketches annotated in the sculptor's distinct handwriting, lines that read, "Stone is not dead. It waits." That phrase became both warning and prophecy, inspiring new generations of sculptors to seek the boundary he crossed. Even now in dim museums, visitors claim that under certain light, his statues seem to breathe, not metaphorically, but with a subtle rise and fall, like the first inhalation of creation itself. Rome remains haunted, not by ghosts, but by the residue of a genius who blurred the line between life and art. His name, lost to records, endures only in whispers, the vanished sculptor who made marble remember breath. Even centuries after his disappearance, the mystery of the sculptor refuses to settle into history. Every scholar who tries to define him ends up doubting their own logic. His absence feels deliberate, as if he erased himself before anyone could claim him. The more one studies his work, the deeper the unease grows, because each statue seems to contain something that defies explanation. When light strikes the marble at certain angles, veins appear beneath the surface, faint but pulsing. Spectrographic studies done in secret laboratories showed traces of organic material, something impossible for stone carved in the early 18th century. Scientists dismissed the results as contamination, but the researchers who handled the samples began reporting nightmares of suffocation, of lungs turning to stone mid-breath. One historian swore he heard a sigh echo through the archives while reading the sculptor's last documented commission, a statue titled Respiro Dei, the Breath of God. The commission was never completed, and the patron's name vanished from every record a year later. Some say the church confiscated the piece. Others believe it was destroyed after an exorcism gone wrong. The missing patrons, the erased archives, the surviving sketches, all form a trail that leads nowhere, looping back to the same unanswered question. Did he bring life into marble, or did he carve marble out of life? A controversial theory emerged in 1891 when a crypt beneath Trastevere was unearthed. Inside were sculptures unlike any seen before, figures frozen mid-motion, expressions caught between agony and awe. Their flesh was pale, but carried the texture of skin stretched over bone. And when torches passed, their eyes seemed to shimmer with trapped moisture. The excavation halted after several workers collapsed, claiming to feel their own hearts slowing in rhythm with the silence of the crypt. The chamber was sealed, but witnesses claimed that faint breathing could be heard from behind the stone door for weeks after. In the 1920s, an art historian named Vittorio del Santi became obsessed with proving that the sculptor had discovered a lost technique from ancient Greece, one that merged mysticism, geometry, and biological transmutation. He theorized that the sculptor had used human subjects, not models but living beings, infusing their final breath into the marble during carving. Vittorio's notebooks describe a recurring dream, standing in a workshop filled with dust that shimmered like lungs exhaling. He wrote of hearing the sculptor's voice whisper, "Creation demands surrender." 2 months later, Del Santi was found dead in his study, his skin hardened to a stony texture from chest to neck. The coroner's report remains sealed, yet his final entry still circulates among forbidden art circles. He never vanished. He transcended. Such words blur the line between myth and madness, yet they echo too closely with the rumors that haunted Rome for generations. The sculptor's last apprentice, before disappearing himself, claimed that his master had been searching for perfect silence, a state where stone could remember breath, where art would no longer need a creator. No one ever saw that apprentice again, but centuries later, when the foundations of a collapsed villa were excavated, workers unearthed a marble block inscribed with faint letters, "Non finis sed initium." Not the end, but the beginning. Since then, every historian who encounters the case leaves with an identical impression, that the sculptor didn't die and didn't vanish. He became the silence his art was trying to capture, and that silence, they say, still lingers in Rome, waiting for someone to listen long enough to hear it breathe again. For years, investigators, historians, and even priests tried to unravel what truly happened to the sculptor, who gave stone the illusion of breath, but every time someone thought they were close, the evidence dissolved into dust, like the marble itself refused to be understood. In the early 1900s, a restoration expert named Armando Falci was granted permission to examine one of the last authenticated pieces attributed to the vanished artist, a veiled figure of a child asleep. Falci worked in total silence, recording every texture, every imperfection, until one night his notes stopped mid-sentence. The next morning, the workshop was found empty, except for the statue standing slightly differently than before, its head tilted toward the door, lips parted just enough to suggest a sigh. The journal left behind contained a single unfinished line. "It
moved! Rumors exploded!"
Some claimed Falci had become the sculpture, that his body was transmuted into stone as payment for curiosity. Others whispered that the sculptor's work was not bound by centuries, that the marble still sought the one who carved it, still yearning for its lost breath. Decades later, in 1967, an underground archive in Vatican City revealed an unsigned document labeled the Anima Protocol. It referenced a forbidden method of capturing vital energy during the last breath of life, transferring it through harmonic vibration into stone. The document mentioned the name of a Roman artist active in 1704, no surname, just a monogram, LV. The same initials appear carved faintly beneath the base of one surviving statue in Florence, one that museum staff refused to keep on display overnight. Guards have reported faint breathing sounds from the exhibit hall, like wind trapped inside the stone's hollow lungs. In 1982, a geologist from the University of Turin conducted a private test using seismic resonance, intending to prove these claims were absurd. What the instruments recorded instead was a rhythmic vibration, consistent with a resting human heartbeat. The recording, which lasted 7 minutes, abruptly stopped when the lights flickered and the marble cracked from within. The sample remains in Vatican custody, sealed and unexamined since that night. Scholars debate, skeptics mock, Yet no one can explain how a sculptor from 1704 managed to blur the border between creation and consciousness. Some theorists suggest he uncovered a metaphysical resonance, an alignment between sound, intention, and matter so precise that reality itself bent to his will. Others think he simply disappeared because he succeeded too well, that in carving breath he gave part of his own soul to every figure until nothing of him remained. Legends claim his final masterpiece was never marble at all, but human flesh turned cold under divine defiance. Modern artists continue to chase his secret, visiting Rome in quiet obsession, standing before the ruins of his old studio. Some say that under certain moonlight, you can hear chiseling echoing beneath the cobblestones, faint and rhythmic, as if creation itself refuses to die. There are stories of tourists who take photographs near those ruins only to find strange distortions later. Faces half-formed in the background, eyes that seem alive for a split second before fading. One historian described it perfectly. He wanted to make eternity breathe, and in doing so, he suffocated time itself. That line has haunted art circles ever since. And perhaps that is the truth. Maybe he didn't vanish. Maybe he became part of his creations. Maybe the statues that seem to exhale in the dark aren't imitations of life at all. They're continuations of him, still searching for the warmth he traded for immortality. In that sense, his curse was never disappearance but persistence, the inability to rest. Every breath taken near his work might be borrowed from him, every whisper around his name a fragment of what remains of his soul. The sculptor of Rome, they say, is not gone. He listens through marble lungs, through dust that remembers touch, through silence heavy enough to breathe. Rome never truly buried the memory of the vanished sculptor. His presence still hums beneath the cobblestones, carried in the soft hush of night when even the wind dares not breathe too loudly. The city pretends to forget, but its walls remember. Every shadow that drifts past an old statue feels heavier, slower, almost aware. Locals call it superstition. Historians call it a legend wrapped in dust. But those who have stood alone before his remaining works know something deeper. Something alive hides in the silence. They say if you stand close enough, your own heartbeat begins to synchronize with the marble. The sculptor's story never ended with his disappearance. It merely changed form. The people of Rome whisper that he became the breath he once carved, his soul divided among every statue he touched. Decades passed, centuries turned. Yet every few years someone claims to feel a pulse when they rest their hand against his work. Some leave gifts, candles, coins, prayers, hoping to calm whatever spirit lingers there. Others run. The church never confirmed anything but quietly restricted access to several of his rumored creations, sealing them behind velvet curtains and stone doors. Still, the legend grows. Artists travel from across the world to feel the same impossible life he trapped in stone. They all come searching for his secret, and many leave changed. Some return home inspired. Others vanish entirely, as if the city itself consumes those who look too closely. In 1954, a sculptor from Vienna reportedly disappeared while studying one of the few authenticated pieces locked inside a private vault. The guards heard no sound, only a slow scraping like marble shifting. When they opened the room, the sculpture's expression had changed. Its mouth slightly open, its eyes softer, alive. Investigators later discovered fingerprints embedded within the stone, belonging to no one living. Since then, every attempt to examine his works under laboratory conditions has failed. Machines malfunction, lenses blur, lights flicker. It's as though reality itself rejects the act of analysis, preserving the mystery by force. The few photos that exist of his surviving works show something strange. Faint distortions around the edges, like heat ripples. When magnified, those distortions form patterns resembling lungs. Experts call it coincidence, but believers call it proof. Rome, ever ancient, seems to feed on this story, absorbing it into its timeless soul. Tourists walk through piazzas unaware that beneath their feet lie hidden chambers, where his unfinished pieces still rest, covered in cloth, untouched. Some say curators hear muffled breathing through the fabric late at night. Others refuse to enter those rooms at all. Every generation inherits the same warning. Beauty should never feel alive. But his art defied that rule. It blurred the line between admiration and fear, between creation and possession. What he gave to the world was more than sculpture. It was defiance of mortality itself. And maybe that was his sin. The more he sought to immortalize life, the more he surrendered his own. Rome carries that contradiction like a scar. The people cannot forget him, but they cannot name him either. He exists in fragments, letters carved into pedestals, initials hidden in shadows. whispers that crawl through museums when the lights go out. Some scholars believe the sculptor discovered the divine frequency of breath, the rhythm that binds all living things, and used it to awaken his marble. Others insist that he traded his humanity to become the silence he once shaped. Either way, his curse lingers. Everything he touched refuses to stay dead. Even now, in dim cathedrals, visitors claim to feel warmth radiating from the statues, like the faint memory of human skin. And in the corners of the city where his name was erased, the air feels heavier, dense, sentient, alive. Perhaps that is his legacy. Not glory, not fame, but a whisper that never stops breathing. Centuries later, the story of the vanished sculptor still clings to Rome like a shadow that refuses to fade. His name has been erased from every official record, yet his presence feels closer than ever, woven into the air that fills the city's lungs. Those who wander near the ruins of his last known workshop swear they can hear faint hammering beneath the earth, a slow, rhythmic chisel striking from somewhere far below. The sound doesn't echo, it breathes. Locals say that if you follow it, the air grows warmer, as though something alive moves just beneath the stone. Some call it imagination, others call it warning. In 2017, a group of historians attempted to excavate that workshop. They uncovered fragments of marble streaked with traces of iron, too organic, too red. Their instruments picked up strange frequencies that mimicked the cadence of a human heartbeat. The deeper they dug, the stronger the sound became until one night it stopped abruptly. The next morning, their tools were found covered in a thin layer of white dust. The team disbanded. The report was sealed. That same year, an anonymous video surfaced online showing a veiled statue in a candlelit chamber. The figure seemed to inhale, then exhale, a slow, visible motion that sent the flames flickering. The clip vanished within hours, deleted from every platform. The uploader's account was erased, but once something is seen, it cannot be unseen. The legend found new life. Artists began to speak of the sculptor as if he were an ancient god of creation, the embodiment of art's eternal hunger, to make the lifeless move, to make the silent speak. The church remained silent, but the Vatican archives expanded their restricted section on artistic anomalies. Some whispered that a new statue had appeared, one that no one commissioned, standing overnight near the Pantheon. Authorities removed it before dawn, but those who saw it described its eyes as open, its lips trembling like someone holding a breath. No photos remain, yet people still search the alleys for where it stood. Every few years, stories like these resurface, new sightings, new tremors, new whispers in marble corridors. They say that at night, when the fog rolls low, you can hear a faint exhale drifting through Rome's streets. It's not the wind. It's the sculptor's breath, still echoing through the veins of the city he once loved. He is not gone. He is the pulse between heartbeats, the silence between footsteps, the shiver that moves through those who dare to look too long at beauty. His curse, or perhaps his triumph, was that he succeeded too well. He gave breath to what should never have breathed, and in doing so he lost the right to rest. The boundary between life and stone blurred forever. Rome, eternal and haunted, became his final sculpture. Every shadow, every whisper, every heartbeat under the moonlight belongs to him. And maybe that was always his purpose, not to create statues that breathed, but to carve eternity itself, one sigh at a time. Even now, the marble remembers. It listens, it waits. Somewhere, deep beneath the old streets, the rhythm continues. A slow, patient pulse echoing through centuries of silence. And if you ever find yourself walking alone through Rome after midnight, listen closely. When the air thickens and your breath catches for no reason, when the world feels still but alive, you'll know he's near. The vanished sculptor, the man who carved breath into stone, never truly disappeared. He became what every artist dreams of becoming, immortal through the life he gave away. In that endless exchange, he found both his damnation and his divinity. Rome will never breathe without him again.